All right, if I could have everybody come in and grab your seats, please. Members of the committee, come on up to the rostrum if you're not already. I'd like to welcome everybody to the first interim joint committee meeting on appropriations and revenue for the 2025 interim. At this time, Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Senator Boswell. Here. Senator Funke-Fromeyer. Senator Givens. Senator Maiden. Here. Senator Mays-Bledsoe. Here. Senator Neal. Senator Nunn.
Here.
Senator Rawlings. Senator Richardson.
Here.
Senator Webb. Representative Banta.
Present.
Representative Bojanowski.
Here.
Representative Bowling.
Here.
Representative Bray.
Present.
Representative Bridges.
Here.
Representative Brown. Representative Dietz.
Here.
Representative Fleming. Representative Freeland.
Present.
Representative Fugit.
Here.
Representative Gentry. Representative Hart.
Here.
Representative Lockett.
Present.
Representative McPherson. Representative Riley. Representative Stevenson. Representative Thomas.
Present.
Representative
Here.
Representative Upchurch.
Here.
Representative Williams.
Here.
Co-Chair Petrie.
Here.
Chair McDaniel.
Here. Very well. Having a quorum and duly constituted to conduct business, we'll go ahead and get rolling. First of all, I'd like to recognize Brittany Lavick-Waller, who is our grad fellow this semester and also a student at NKU Chase College of Law. So, Brittany, welcome to the committee. Very well. Any other members having introductions? Seeing none. This time we've got representatives from the Kentucky Department of Education and SFCC here with us today. If you guys could come on up, identify yourself, and proceed.
Good afternoon. I'm Che Ritter with the Kentucky Department of Education.
Christy Russell with the School Facility Construction Commission.
Crystal Smith of the School Facilities Construction Commission.
Well, welcome to you all today. Obviously, school facilities and the funding and nickels and construction is something that's oft discussed, but I don't know if it's understood as well and often as it is discussed. So we're hoping you guys can help shed some additional light today, and thank you, and please proceed. Thank
you very much, Co-Chair. Very excited to see this many people in our room to listen to me talk about nickels. I feel like a rock star up here today. So, like the cicadas, I come back often to talk to A&R education committees. One big important part of my job is school facilities funding. This includes new construction, renovations, property as well.
Jay, is your mic on?
Yes, I'll move a little closer. Is this
good?
Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay. This is a very brief introduction to this topic, and we always encourage, if you want to know more, we're glad to come back individually, anything like that we can help clarify any questions you may have about your own districts and your constituents' districts as well. So there are a few different buckets of money that can pay for school facilities in Kentucky. Probably one of the largest, primarily, is what's called the nickels. And when you get your property tax bill and you see that line item for your school tax embedded in there, depending on where you are, there will be at least one nickel in that tax rate. So if it's 68, roughly 5 cents will be restricted for this facility support program in Kentucky, the first one. That's mandatory for every district. And over the history of budgets and statutes have been written to provide some additional nickels for specific situations. One is the growth nickel, for example. Pick on Oldham County. They had a lot of growth, had to build. And this growth nickel was instituted by the General Assembly at the time to help them kind of catch up with their facilities and to have capacity for that number of students. And as you can see, about 34 districts at the time qualified for that. There's some additional equalized growth nickels. This was part 2 of that. And then you get into, and we're going to skip recallable just for a second, the equalized facility funding nickel. So all these have kind of a specific reason behind them at the time they were written, either in the budget bill and eventually moved to statute, which was KRS 157-621. And these two are very specific. BRAC, base realignment. This was back when Fort Knox was under the microscope of the federal government, and Hardin County was expecting either an influx of students or some adjustment of the population there at Fort Knox. So this nickel was to assist them to kind of handle that impact of those students. And it was only for Hardin County. The Category 5, 2010, there was a list of basically the worst buildings, and this was some money set aside from the General Assembly to help address those, the kind of the worst of the worst. And it knocked out, I believe it was about 9 buildings. And going back to the only active that could be adopted today by your districts would be this recallable nickel. There's a process. They basically go to their board. The board adopts it. There's a window allowing the public to petition it. They can force a vote, and they can, the public, depending on the vote, success or failure. But generally, this is what we have available now for a district that says, we want to build a high school or do some renovations, and we just don't have the cash flow. So this is kind of that last option for them, is to do this recallable nickel. Right now, we have several districts that levy more than one, and usually this is because they're a little smaller or their need is larger. They may be behind a couple of decades in upgrading their facilities. So the cost of construction obviously has gone up, just like it has on homes. So it's kind of hard for them to catch up with 1 or even 2 nickels. Some have done 3. So we were asked as part of this presentation to update some slides to kind of show roughly where all these building funds are coming from. And my friends to the right of me are going to talk a lot more about SFCC. So I want to kind of stay out of their lane. But as you can see, in 2025, we sort of tapped into about $900 million of facilities funding. And when you go through House Bill 6 of 2024 and future budgets, you'll see it's, I think, about 5 or 6 paragraphs talking about nickels and equalization. So if they do something locally, that equalization becomes sort of the butter on the bread. It's a big factor in why they do this. It's the state funding that comes along with that. It's formula driven. It's not a dollar for dollar match or anything like that, but it's a very integral part of this process. Again, this is sort of that same chart, but more generic, local and state. As you can see, the locals have kind of picked up just because of the need of and cost of construction have gone up. The state equalization is a formula again, so it's not something we tweak at KDE. It's a very formula-driven thing. And this was another slide we wanted to update for the committee, just kind of showing the history going back to about 2021. These same charts are available in an OEA report that we can send you the link to that goes back quite a bit further than this, but this was just kind of an updated of those charts. And I'm going to hand it over to Christy.
Okay. The SFCC, we're a piece that districts use to fill an unmet facility need. So in the fall of this year, KDE will work with all 171 district facility plans and develop an unmet need report, where they take the total facility need across the state, less all local available revenues, and that will give us an unmet facility need. The commission, who I work for, will adopt that in December, and that figure will be given to you all so you will know what the facility need is across the state currently. In 2023, it was approximately $7 billion, which is huge, and we all know that. 951 million local revenue was available in 2023. This is done every odd-numbered year. So we will do that this fall. In January of 2026, the commission will give out offers of assistance based on what you all gave us in the last budget session. Our appropriation goes out in forms of debt service. So it's like a mortgage payment. We make a mortgage payment for a school district twice a year. They receive an offer of assistance in January that lasts them for 8 years. They can escrow these funds if they need to save for a certain school building project. They can use it immediately once the funding is available. That will happen again in January of this year. If you can look here, our offers of assistance have diminished over the course of years. They go up and down. The last offer that was given out by the General Assembly has been our smallest offer given since the inception of the SFCC, which was in 1985. With the cost of construction at $400 or $500 a square foot for most school building projects now, $40 million is a very small offer of assistance. It's going to make the district's offers that they receive about a third of what they had been getting in the past. Until we receive more funding, we can't really help them any more than we are. I did send you all in your committee packet everyone's balances that they have now, what they have available. My capital plan, I did request additional funds for school buildings, another $60 million for the next biennium to get these offers up. We are one piece that every school district can touch if they have an unmet facility need. Last time there were 28 districts that did not have a need, that the legislature and the state did not help with their facilities. They were able to do it themselves. This time, I don't know what it's going to be. We will figure that out in the fall. The commission will adopt that in December, and we will give all that information to you all in January. And I don't know what else you'd like me to add.
Thank you. A couple
Yes.
of questions in the offers of assistance document that you provided.
Yes.
There were some references to a 0 rejected, 0 no action.
Yes.
What does that mean exactly?
Districts have the option 30 days after we give them their offer, they can accept the offer, and they can reject the offer, or they take no action. We've had one district that took no action at all, which means they did not take it before their board. They did not give them the opportunity to decide if they wanted to accept the offer or not. The ones that reject, they reject for numerous amounts of reasons. They reject because they didn't need our money. They reject because they have funds sitting in capital outlay and in building fund that they did not want to restrict for our offer, which is something that we do require. If you have any leftover funds sitting in your capital outlay fund or building fund at the end of the odd numbered year, the SFCC requires you to restrict those for our offer that we give out in January, which tells us that you have these funds available. You can use them on a priority 1 or 2 project on your DFP. If a district decides that they don't want to escrow those funds by our restrictions, then they will reject that offer, and they can use those funds on anything that they would like to use them in within the parameters of that, in any priority. So they reject them if they don't want to restrict them for the reasons that we ask them to spend them on.
Gotcha. Thank you. Representative Fugit.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just speaking about the nickel tax, because I'm not going to act like I know everything about it for sure. The school board, they're the ones that enact the nickel tax or vote on the nickel tax. And is that done at a specific time of year, or can they do it like any time they need the extra money? Can they vote on the nickel tax?
Generally, they can do it, when they're adopting their regular tax rates. But logistically, it's very hard if they're successful to get that bill out in time to collect it. But there's a few different parties involved. The sheriff, if it's a county district, is printing those bills, and generally you want one bill to go out. If you send 2 bills out, taxpayers are going to question and obviously get pretty upset over it. If you send a second bill, collections are generally going to be less than stellar because people just get confused. Why am I getting a second bill? So there have been some cases where districts are actually advertise, get everything, get the table set early, and then when they get to about July 25th and August, they will adopt everything at once, and then they send one bill out, and that way the taxpayers can pay it at one time if they're successful.
Right. One follow-up, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Thank you. So basically they wait till the new tax assessments come out, like at the first of the year, before they see they need it or not, right?
Correct.
Is that right? Okay.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's
And-
all.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Senator Boswell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So there's a lot of talk here about facilities. Then you also talk about the embedded nickel tax that's been on for a long time. It's in all districts. So my question to you is, like in my district, I'm not sure about other districts, our school board has decided to build a huge new administration building. Where are those funds coming from?
So it would depend on each district, and we can look specifically at your senator pretty quickly. We can get you an answer on how they're going to pay for that.
Where do they typically come from?
Typically, it's going to be
presentation?
from these nickels. They can use general funds in some cases, and this would just be revenue that's coming in locally or seek money. But generally, it's going to be from facilities funding. These nickels, depending on what else is on their district facility plan. But
Okay, I'm just expressing my concern that as we have such a great need for our schools, for our children, that it appears to me that we're spending a lot of money on administration. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. You've mentioned about the facilities needs. Who determines the need of a facility?
So as part of that process that she mentions, it's starting actually now. We're already talking about it. We will go through a district facilities plan. Some are updated every 4 years, and there's an associated cost with this need. And of course, within the last 4 years, cost of construction has gone up, so we adjust accordingly. And it's sort of if you think of a priority listing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Priority 1 and 2 are going to be your school buildings. This process involves a local planning committee, which is members of your community, teachers and staff, as well as the local board of education. So that helps develop the need. You know, what do you need to address all of these issues? And then you subtract out what they could do locally with their funding. So if they're sitting on $40 million generically, and I think there was a slide in here, at the top here, you take their total facility need minus the local revenue, and that's, the unmet facility need. Does that answer your question, Senator?
It does, but I mean, the need is actually submitted by the locals. It's not necessarily something that's put together from KDE, or is it audited once the locals submit?
It would be done locally, and there is some review process. I actually have staff that go through each of these individually to make sure that everything's reflected correctly, that there's no sort of different numbers that wouldn't make sense. On a elementary school, a new one, if they put in a cost of $10 million, it's not realistic. We go back and review these district facility plans very, very closely because so much depends on that unmet facility need amount too. So we do review that part of it.
Senator Funky Fromeyer.
Thank you. In fact, adding to that, reviewing it, is there actually a person that is going to acknowledge that it might have been submitted as 10 million, but then when it's eyeballed by an inspector, is there someone that physically comes and inspects that facility need?
No, it's all on paper. We have project managers that work for the Kentucky Department of Education that are assigned each district. So I think we have a total of 4 right now that cover the state. They'll work with the district during their district facility planning process to make sure, for example, you don't put a building on there for 1,000 kids when you need a building for 350. It's kind of a generic example of what they're looking for, as well as anything that, shouldn't be on there. For example, you don't put a baseball field in priority 1. Priority 1 is restricted to your elementary schools, middles, and high schools, and maybe your area technical centers and things like that. So quite a lot of rules about what can go into this amount. But at the same time, we're still reviewing it pretty closely to make sure there's nothing in there that shouldn't be, basically.
Okay, that's helpful.
Good.
So when I was looking at the 2021 budget session K-Fix list grants, and I'm a little new. I came in early 23. So it indicates that these Fed funds deadline 12/31/26. What happens with these dollars that are on this list? Are these still available for these schools, or are they in motion to be spent?
They've already been given to the districts. As far as I know, everyone except for 2, I think everyone but 2 have already started their projects or have completed them. There are 2 that are still in the planning process, and they know of this deadline. The money has been sent to the district, and it is sitting in their bank, waiting for them to do their project. And it was sent right after they were awarded by the legislature.
And so if by 12/31 that is not spent, does that get pulled back from their bank account?
I don't know that yet. We've never had The SFCC has never had federal funds before. They know of the deadline. We're giving them a little time to figure everything out. Everyone is on a path, so we're not bugging them specifically about that deadline yet. They do know it's there. We've had numerous meetings with the districts. There's 2 that are still have not completed their projects. So I don't know that. I don't know that
I'll
answer,
have
and
to
I
ask
apologize.
if those are in my Senate district, because I see I've got a few on the list, and I don't.
Maybe you can find that answer out for me.
Yes, I might look into that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Going back to the offers of assistance, when I look at this list and people who have 0 offers, I can't really find a rhyme or reason, because we vary from Jefferson County has had no offers.
They've spent them all.
What-
If you're looking at the list that had
This
their,
is still outstanding then.
oh, I'm sorry. I
You
apologize.
know, is this what's
This is their offers they have as of right now. What I gave you. So if it's a 0, they've spent all their money. They have nothing else available.
so we are making offers to everyone. They just
Absolutely.
have nothing left based off
Correct.
of these. Okay.
Absolutely.
Got it.
Yes, this is just their balance as of right now.
Okay.
Just so you all would have an idea of what they could bond with the money that they have.
Could you follow up with what those offers were
Sure.
through these years?
Absolutely.
Rather than what's
Sorry,
just
I
available?
misunderstood
No,
your
no, that's
request.
okay.
Yes,
Thank you.
I'll be happy to.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Yep. Co-Chair Petrie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Want to make sure I understand the unmet needs list first. I understand there's a paper review by KDE. There is no in-person review. This is a self-reported list that has a paper, self-reported by local, that has a paper review at KDE level.
Correct. And some of them are also, there was a reference to KFIX, which is the facilities inventory system that some of you all are familiar with. That's part of this process too. There's an architect hired by the district to kind of walk through and, you know, judging their buildings is not the right terminology, but kind of walk through and do an assessment of those properties. When it comes to KDE, you know, we're on the very front end of this to make sure that district facility plan follows a lot of regulations. But you're absolutely correct. There is a paper review. My staff generally is not going out and walking through the building. So
Understood. If I may follow. There is a bond capacity component of what the offers are, or unrelated entirely?
I mean, we received $40 million in bonding.
Bonding at the local level.
Bonding.
Their bonding capacity, is that a factor in what
Yes.
the offer is?
Yes.
And the bonding capacity of any individual district would not just be relative to the unmet need, it would be relative to other things that they have bonded for, which reduces their capacity. So for instance, if they built building 1, 2, and filled 3 and 4 and built this 7, 8, and 9, it reduces their bonding capacity, which actually helps them on their offers.
Potentially, yes, sir.
I don't think it's potential if that's done, and they reduce their bonding capacity by other projects before they get to their priority 1, 2 on the SFCC type category, then it increases their offers.
Their local bonding capacity, yes.
Okay. That's good enough for now. Thank you.
Very good. All right. Talk to me about how the KFIX list ties into this.
It's available. We publish once a year. We share that with the Legislative Research Commission, but we also update it on a monthly basis. And then you'll see, if you go out there, there's a couple different tabs on this listing. One is what we call A1 schools, which are your elementary, high school, middle schools. There's A5s, there's different categorizations. But it's also, if you go back, I think 2010, there was a Parsons list. And if you think of it like a grading system, and I'll just pick on one district, like Franklin County has a set number of schools, and when they're going through their process of developing a plan, you know, do you want to tackle the absolute worst of the worst first, or is it worth renovating? There's a lot of math involved to say, you know, we really need to build new because the renovation is going to be almost as much to fix our building, get it up to code, et cetera. So all these factors go into or come out of KFIX. For example, right now, I believe the number one school on there is my old middle school, Bondert Middle School. It's probably built in the 60s, I think. And it's on their list. However, Franklin County on their district facility plan will be addressing that later, as they're still addressing an elementary school. So they're not locked into that list. It gives them an idea of the severity, I think is the right word, of how good or bad shape the building is in. And that Parsons list was back in 2010, I think was a good preview of how statewide, you're always going to have buildings that fall into this, the worst of the worst, and how that can be addressed. So that's essentially what KFIX is doing. But it's also done, Parsons was done as a state contract where people were going out and judging these buildings, or assessing them rather, whereas KFIX is sort of done at the district level by architects on record with the district that work for the district. And there's a big, long process of audits, reviews, and everything going into KFIX. Again, making sure the data quality is there is very, very important. To Representative Petrie's point about, if you and I both walk into the same building, we may see something different. Well, this is sort of consolidating that idea that there's going to be a consistent approach to these scores. And if you look at KFIX over the years, you'll see schools drop off, and you'll see schools get added on because they've addressed the need that was there, of course.
But is there a linkage between the needs assessment that's submitted and KFIX to ensure a uniformity in the data between those two processes?
I think there's some consistency between the two, but again, not each district participates in KFIX. It's not required by law. I think we're up to, if you hadn't asked, it's over 1,000 buildings now in KFIX, but not every district participates. So we don't have all that data built into KFIX. I think the dream was to have all that consolidated in and tie it all to their district facility plan and ultimately that unmet need, so it's all in a straight line rather than some districts don't participate, others do. And frankly, some districts just don't have much on their facility plan. An East Bernstadt may have an HVAC project. They may not ever build a new school, but other districts are build, like Warren County builds quite a bit, obviously. So they probably participate in KFIX for that assessment.
Got it. Yeah, and that definitely was the plan, because it took the Parsons list about 6 years to be fairly unwieldy and trying to utilize in the budgeting process. Maybe this time around we'll restrict offers of assistance only to those that are participating in KFIX. I'll bet we'd see our participation rates increase.
I would say you would, yes, sir.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Co-Chair Petrie.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. On the KFIX, just making sure I understand, it is still a self-report, even though you have an architect paid by the board generally.
Yes, sir.
So it's somebody inside that district that's saying what that is.
Yes, sir.
And it is self-reported, maybe a paper check, but nothing on the ground.
Correct. That is correct.
And so that's really the same between both of those lists.
Yes, sir.
Okay, or both ones we're talking about, not the old Parsons. And then I've heard some discussion among some superintendents, mainly, of the way these lists, let's just stick with the special offers or the facilities, it can reward those that don't take good care of their own existing properties. So if I don't put my budget money into maintaining my properties, then I move up the list and my need gets higher and the extremity of my needs become greater, and I move up and rewarded for not taking care of my buildings as a nearby district might do, and they don't get the same offers. Fair enough?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And I want to piggyback on an earlier point the co-chair Petrie had made, which is if a district should choose to spend money on, say, a new administration building, and they were to bond in order to build that building, and there were to the detriment of potentially a school project, they would then be eligible for more in offers of assistance because their bonding potential overall had decreased. Is that correct?
Yes.
Gotcha. Do I have other questions at this time? I have no doubt that we will have many, many more between here and the middle of next April.
All right. Thank
Guys,
you all. Have
thank
a
you
good day.
for the time. Okay. Next up, we've got testimony on some of our economic development projects, specifically related to the electric vehicle industry. Mr. Secretary, if you and all the guests would care to come forward, please.
We would be happy to do so. Mr. Chairman, I'll introduce my guest in just a moment as soon as I get plugged into this system here. Perfect. Mr. Chairman, am I on? Can you hear me? Sorry about that. Usually I have somebody taking care of these technology issues, so I apologize for that. Mr. Chairman, we basically, first of all, want to appreciate the chance to be here to talk about these important projects. As you know, we absolutely always welcome the chance to visit with the members of the legislature and to provide information that we know is important to all of you. So today we're going to go through quickly an introduction of our guests who are here representing both Blue Oval as well as Ascend Elements. We're going to give you no background on the Cabinet for Economic Development, so we're going to skip all of that, but it is in the appendix, so you have that information. And what we're going to try to do in the presentation is take the very good questions we receive from this committee, have them in the slides, and then point blank answer each question as we go through it, and then we'll do this in a fairly rapid order and be able to answer the other questions that come from the body. But we felt it was really important to take your information and your questions and to assure you that we're going to answer them. At a high level, I can tell you that both projects are completely compliant with all of our programs. Between the two of them, they're approaching 1,100 jobs, and there's really good progress being made on both of them, and we're going to talk about those today.
Mr. Secretary, if I could just pause you for a second. We obviously know who you are, but I think you're going to introduce your guests, but identify yourself for the record, please.
Sorry about that, Mr. Chairman. My name is Jeff Noel, and I don't go by titles, but I am Secretary of the Cabinet for Economic Development. And to my right, I'd like to introduce Kelly McAllister, who's the External Affairs Director at Blue Oval SK. And then Roger Lynn, who I think's got about 20, 25 years experience in the EV industry, who is Vice President of Government Affairs at Ascend Elements. In the audience, we also have Mark Fern, who is the Plant Manager at Ascend Elements. And if I'm not mistaken, I think I saw Carter Hendricks, who's joining us, and he's the economic development professional from Southwest Kentucky, who's had a lot of involvement with this project. Moving on, Mr. Chairman, we don't need to get into the details, but these projects were a big part, I think, of successes that have occurred in the state of Kentucky. And I always like to go to the fact that we don't do anything in our cabinet that not is at least trying to be strategic. And if you look at our roadmap and you look at the very first priority, we must win the automotive future. And that means that regardless of what the mix might be from an automotive mix perspective in that portfolio, whether it's hydrogen, whether it's EV, or whether it's the ICE, we need to make sure we're winning in that space because Kentucky is heavily dependent upon the automotive manufacturing. And 2 out of every 3 counties have at least one automotive supplier. Many communities, like I met with today, have as many as 6, 8, and 9 automotive suppliers in their community. So from our perspective, we're not trying to look at a crystal ball. We just know that the automobile companies will decide, working with their own people, and what the consumer decides that mix is going to be. We want to make sure we're winning in all of those spaces because it's too important to our state not to do so. And I would point to some information I think is relevant. While I think there has been some slowdown in the sale of EV vehicles, you know, in the first quarter of this year, there have been 300,000 new electric vehicles sold in the United States. And if you think about that, that's also about 11% from last year. If you get down a little bit deeper, you know that 7.5% of all vehicle sales in this country were from the EV sector, and that's up from 7% in 2024. Globally, the EV market grew by 29% in March of this year, and we are seeing a record amount of sales that represent the EV, the hybrid sales, constituting about 20%. And projections are that'll achieve and reach 25% in 2025. So
Mr.
for us,
Secretary, I want to interrupt you just real
Yes,
quickly
sir.
there. I think that while growth in the sector is continuing, it's off pretty substantially, specifically on electric-only vehicles. And I think Ford specifically has withdrawn some of their plans for some of those vehicles that otherwise were going to be strictly electric. And I'd like to hear a little bit about that from either yourself or one of your guests.
I'll ask Kelly to make some comments in that space, and you're absolutely right. the growth projections that were out there that were being looked at by all the companies was at this angle. That growth, but still growth nonetheless, has changed to a different inflection point, but still growth nonetheless. And Kelly can certainly opine and chime in, but the folks at Ford have kept us fully apprised. They're reacting to the changes in the marketplace, changes that have happened from a regulatory and public policy perspective. And yet we still know that this industry and the sales of these types of vehicles are going to continue to grow. It's a matter of, if you will, where were we when we had the opportunity to do this project? And absolutely, everyone was projecting much larger sales of the EV sector, but those sales are still growing. And just as importantly, I think when you look at the sales of EV and hybrid that's going to make up 25% share of the market, we have to have those types of facilities. But Kelly, do you want to add anything to that?
Sure, Mr. Secretary, Mr. Chairman. I can't speak specifically to Ford. We are an independent company. Our parents are Ford and SK On, but I can't speak to their sales. But we do believe the growth is solid. Of course, projections are projections, and it was projected to grow much faster a few years ago than it is. This is the reality that we're dealt with, and we're pleased with the growth that we're seeing.
Thank you, Kelly. Mr. Chairman, you know, obviously the language and where we are with the agreement on these projects, one of them came specifically out of Senate Bill 5, and I won't get into the details, but I just want to say thank you to this body because you all deliberated it, you passed it, and the agreement that we were able to reach would not have been possible without everything that you all provided. And specifically for Blue Oval, there was a $250 million loan from KETFA to the company. There was $20 million in training grants under the Bluegrass State Skills Corporation. There was also $5 million in training grants under the Kentucky Community and Technical College system. And there was a $25 million facility built on the campus, which is very heavily used because I've been there many times, that was there to be able to be used by Blue Oval as they both have their own onboarding, but also have their recruiting and their interview things that take place at that particular facility. So we couldn't have done this without your all's support and your all's leadership, and we just wanted to say thank you in that regard. You know, some of the really important announcements we're going to talk about today are two of those, which is Blue Oval SK, obviously, and the Ascend Elements. But we also had some announcements with Toyota relative to the EV sector that was some $1.3 billion investment, as well as the AESC project. And Mr. Chairman, I know that you had requested if we could bring some information on that project. We received that, and I didn't have time to make sure we coordinate with the company, but either we will come back to do a separate discussion with you or we'll get the information and make sure that all the members have that. But today we want to talk specifically about Blue Oval SK and AESC. And there's no way other than to look at the fact that since we've made these announcements, a lot of suppliers, supply chain companies have announced location, have invested in facilities, have begun hiring their workforce, and they have been bringing some amazing capacity into our state, as well as in their respective area, tremendous global leadership in the EV sector. And keep in mind, there was huge growth globally of EVs around the world, and we are a global state. And the businesses we try to attract are not just focused on the domestic market, but we love to see exports that take place with the businesses that we are recruiting and bringing into the area. As it relates to AESC, without their facility, without their location, we would not have been able to announce the Sinus Fertilizer facility, which is actually one more step in taking items that are in the production phase and recycling it and making fertilizer. And so that investment in those jobs is just another example of the kinds of opportunities that have come as a result of the investments in what I call the anchor projects like AESC and Blue Oval SK. You asked some specific questions, and I'll refrain from going through each of them. I'd rather go through each question and give you the answers, and obviously entertain any of the questions you have further with them. But you asked what were the original terms and conditions of the agreement. There was $250 million structured as a forgivable loan, which I will discuss. Repayments on that forgivable loan, and I actually have a chart that shows what that repayment schedule is in the deck, will begin in March of 2027, with the final payment in March of 2038. Now, this is a forgivable loan, and just so everyone understands, our typical signature programs like KBI were not used in this project, but we used those calculations based on jobs and what kind of benefits would come to the state to be applied to what would be then the basis by which a loan would be forgiven. And basically, and I'll get to specifics in a second, it's an annual situation that if jobs haven't been met and certain payroll figures have not been met, and it falls below 90% of that threshold, then there's repayment to the state of Kentucky based upon this particular loan situation. And I'll get into those details in the next slide, but you also asked the question about were there any federal funds in the project. I know Kelly can expound upon it, but there weren't really federal funds directly related to saying we've approved these federal funds specifically for the project in Elizabethtown, but there were funding from the federal government to the tune of about $9.6 billion that came from the Department of Energy to Blue Oval SK for their operations in the United States. And I don't know if I got all that right, but perfect. But we wanted to make sure we answer that question. Mr. Chairman, I thought this chart would be helpful. I took it out of the loan documents, and there may be one little tweak that I need to explain, but you see the job requirements that are supposed to be created at the end of every year, and December 31st, 2026 is the first year that loan payment begins. It shows 2027 because that's the compliance year, such that in March of 2027, we have to make sure that the loan payment is made. And then at that point, all the paperwork relative to assuring compliance, jobs, and wages, that if they fall below the 90%, that's how we calculate the payments in March, and that's when potentially funding would come back to the state, or in the case of having met those 2,500 jobs or 97% of those jobs, plus a scale of what the wages would be, and I think it's $27.11 per hour before benefits in this upcoming year, and then it goes up every year.
And
then
Mr. Secretary, you're referencing job creation here. I'm assuming that is all jobs that are directly tied to the production of the batteries there at the facility. That's not construction.
No, sir, you are absolutely correct, and I'll restate another way if I could. It's the jobs created directly at the site for Kentucky residents. So we have that as a metric in here as well. So that's why it's important to understand that's the provisions that are in this loan agreement. And we have corporate guarantees, not subsidiary, but we have corporate guarantees from the parents of both entities on the loan amounts that were provided. And another threshold is $2 billion of investments have to be made, which I'm very proud to say have been met from the company, which we have.
Could you define what an investment is?
Yes, sir. It would be plants, equipment. It would be the site prep work that's done on the plant. It could be some of the actual expenses related to putting the equipment in the facility. It could be some of the expenses relative to putting in all of the computer systems and things necessary to become operational. So I would call it tangible investments and tangible items necessary to operate the facility.
And I understand as well that I believe you guys have recently entered into a partnership with Nissan related to the second phase. Is that correct?
Our parents are always looking for new business opportunities. We have not announced any new business. Currently, Ford is our only customer.
Okay, very good. Did Mr. Secretary, then did I misunderstand that Nissan is, or there is another partnership that's occurred with one of the entities in the Commonwealth, or no?
We've read rumors, and we've not been told anything definitively. And I would simply say that when things are definitive prior to announcement or as announcements are taking place, both companies that are involved in this joint venture and the parents, if you will, have been very good about informing us what's fact and what's real and what are they announcing. And we've not received any of that at this juncture.
If they make a partnership like that, does that in any way, shape, or form relieve any of the obligations under the original construct of this agreement?
Yeah, I don't want to speculate, because what I want to understand is what are the terms and conditions if a partnership has been raised? What are the types of jobs that are being created, and are they with Kentucky residents? And then I think we would take a step back and evaluate where we are. But in my humble opinion, I want to understand the transaction before I speculate and before I even would be saying to Kelly that we would agree to those. But if real jobs are being created and they're permanent jobs, then we want to sit down and understand why are they permanent, how do they fit, and how does that relate to the future uses of the building. But I think for our objectives, we would accept jobs, we would accept investment as long as they're Kentucky residents and they're doing something related to the EV sector or in the automotive sector so that we can continue to win in the future in that space. But I'm not saying one way or the other until we understand the deal.
I understand, but I think that it would be very important to us based off of what was represented to us, that not necessarily they might be titled under a different company, but they're there under the same agreement at the same space, et cetera, in order to continue to receive the forgiveness that they stand to receive.
Mr. Chairman, as soon as we know anything, we will provide that information to you. Not to get way down in the weeds, I take everything based upon an EIN number, the employee identification number. That's the employer of record. I want to understand anything that is done relative to kind of just those typical things you look at from a provision in the agreement, and we will inform you of anything we learn so that you can not only have it but share it with the rest of the committee. And we agree that you need to know that information. I'm not trying to sidestep your question at all. You also asked the question about the status of the project. Battery production has already commenced this year, so it's on schedule in terms of what was shared. In light of the market conditions, production in the second facility, or what's called Kentucky 2, has been paused, but there are currently the manufacturing cells that are in the Kentucky 1 for the E-Transit with the enhanced range and the F-150 Lightning that have already begun, and production is there. And as I mentioned earlier, a little over 1,000 jobs are already part of the facility. Kelly actually had to leave an all-hands meeting. They have those several times throughout the year, and just finding a location for those 1,000 employees is a little challenging, but we'll get into more of those details here in a second.
Well, I want to follow up on that for just a quick second. Like you said, I think you're continuing on your construction, but you're not going to activate what's being called Phase 2. Is that correct? Currently.
Referring to Kentucky 2?
Yes.
No, the market will determine when that building will go into production.
But you're going to go ahead and finish construction.
Construction is ongoing, yes.
Yeah. And then obviously there's even more evolving conditions, particularly related to rare earth, our agreements with China that may or may not continue to be in place. How could that impact what you guys are doing?
Any increase in tariffs will affect our business.
We're currently struggling even to get the negotiation with them about the potential materials beyond tariffs. And I don't disagree with your statement, but specific to those materials being available or not, how reliant are you on the import of materials from China to be able to continue your work?
China is not the only place that we will receive materials. They will come from various countries.
How reliant are you, though?
I would say we have other plans in place. We are not fully reliant on anything from China.
Mr. Chairman, I also may just interject for a second. The administration, I think, recognizes the need to have additional access to rare earth materials from different locations. And my understanding is that they have been very supportive of companies that might be either looking to invest in the U.S. in that space or in other parts of the world that are perhaps more friendly. And I think that the kind of work that we're seeing, and even some of the projects that we're actually involved with, there must be a lot of good work being done to try to make sure that any reliance upon China in this space is at least significantly relieved. At least that's the objective of this administration, is based upon everything that I have read.
And I don't disagree, and that's a good national security strategy to begin to make that shift. Now, you're largely pushed into other authoritarian regimes in much of this space anyway, but I become concerned. I've seen certain elements where the United States is counting on north of 90% of particular materials coming from China. That's a lot of any given space to replace. And I'm just curious if you guys, what you're thinking on that.
Why don't we get back to you and provide a written answer so that it can be run through all the right sources and make sure that we give you the facts that you really need, as opposed to maybe hypotheticating or not giving a direct answer to you. We'll get back to you on that. And it's not only is it a very good question, it's a relevant question, and we owe you an answer on that.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah. And Kelly, I think it's already been answered, but describe the delays or changes to the project. There have been changes in the market conditions, but the goals have not changed. And I've been privy to lots of discussions with members of the company, and there is still a really, really strong commitment to fulfilling the jobs and the investments that have been laid out in this agreement moving forward.
I do become concerned with your first point, though. Goals have not been changed, but the time frame has been changed. Do you anticipate changing the time frame of the forgiveness mechanisms that were put in place originally?
My view is that the provisions, and we're going to get into those details further if you'd like, if the number of jobs that are laid out each and every year tied to that payment and that payment schedule, if 90% of those jobs and if 90% of the wages that are laid out are not met, then the repayment on the loan is done on a pro rata basis. So I'm just going to use high-level numbers because my math isn't always the best. But let's say that when that new requirement comes up next year at 2,500, there are only 1,250 jobs. And let's say they've met the wage conditions, then you do a weighted average of both, but the company is required to pay back the pro rata percentage of both the wage requirements and the job requirements to the state of Kentucky each and every year in which that loan agreement is in place. So I look at it, Mr. Chairman, as it's already built in that if market conditions change and they don't meet those 90% thresholds, we get a repayment of that original amount of funding that was provided to the company.
And you don't intend to give the company an extension based off of market conditions?
I'd like to get to the first threshold period and see where we are. And
I would like to say that we would view that very disfavorably.
Mr. Chairman, knowing you well, but knowing you the way I do, and I think you're co-chairperson, I will not make any decision unilaterally. There will be consult made, and quite candidly, I believe an agreement is an agreement. You control what you can control, and let's first look at what is it that Blue Oval SK has been able to control, and have they acted in good faith, because I believe that's a good first important step. But also, let's not be using taxpayers' monies to simply grant extensions or not look at what the terms in the agreement were. And in my humble opinion, next year there's a payment due, next year there's an agreement, and next year it says that those number of jobs and wage scales have not been met, then there has to be a cash repayment and the loan is not forgiven. And I believe that's what's in the contract and that's what we will stick to. But I'm not going to start projecting where we'll be until we understand where we are.
We're obviously hoping that they're wildly successful beyond the projections.
Mr. Chairman, I do as well. And let me also just reiterate, every question is absolutely pertinent, and we appreciate those questions, and I'm glad you asked them. I do want to put something in perspective because I think it's important. With right at 1,050 jobs, Blue Oval SK joins a very elite group of companies across the state of Kentucky, now one of 19 manufacturing concerns that has 1,000 or more employees. You see a count of some 82 companies. Well, that includes the Walmarts and the retail and others, but we wanted to break down how many manufacturers have 1,000 or more employees, and it's a fairly elite company today. So as I understand the loan agreement, as I understand the agreement is in place and we're going to abide by it, I still want to use this as a threshold or a milestone to congratulate Blue Oval SK in saying we have 1,000 jobs and you're a very significant employer and an important member of our business community. Moving on to Blue Oval, and Roger's here with me, so he'll bail me out on anything that I get wrong, I'm sure. This is a company that at least for me is not only important for the automotive sector, but it's important for the future of our economy in many ways, especially as it relates to the recycling of all the elements that go into what I call the battery space. And Roger, I might get this wrong, but anything that requires a lithium battery, you all will be the ones that will be recycling those in a part of what I consider to be an important part of the supply chain process.
That's correct.
You asked some very good questions, and again, I'll state the questions as we get in and answer them. What was the incentive structure? Unlike what was done for Blue Oval SK, and part of that is you look at the number of jobs and investment on scale, it warranted a unique incentive. What we did for Ascend Elements is what I would call our typical incentives. We provided a KBI and a KIA, which is the wage credit that's tied to qualifying investment out of the KBI, as well as the KIA in terms of what you get as a sales tax exemption for qualifying expenditures. I like to call those pay-as-you-go. So the benefits directly to the company are tied to the creation of employment and the spending of money in Kentucky. And when I say employment, it's Kentucky employment. And if they don't create those jobs, and they have had a situation where all the jobs they thought being created had not been created, so therefore they're not receiving any of the benefits because a pay-as-you-go, job creation that you create and spending that you have, that's the benefits that you get. we did provide, in all transparency, funding of $7 million to the local community. In order to do this project, there was a requirement for roads and road access. There was a requirement for rail spur and rail access, which is owned by the community. And Carter's here, I think, who could validate that not only did this investment in the community support Ascend, it's enabled them to have land that has been marketed to and actually part of the Sinus project and some of the others. And the access road system that was expended is also now servicing some 25 existing companies with 6,000 jobs. So the incentive package for Ascend is significantly different than what we did for Blue Oval SK on this pay-as-you-go kind of concept. What's the status of the project, which we'll get into in more detail? The construction is on pause currently, although we embedded a video so you could see the construction process, and it's quite impressive in terms of what's already been done and what investments have been made. But there is a situation that it is on pause, and there's currently, I think, some discussions that I'll get to in a second with the contractor. And so basically you've asked the question, what's the changes in the plant production due to market changes? And I hope to get this right, and I know Roger will help. Ascend Elements looked at the market, saw changes in the market, have now not pivoted, but adjusted to where the market realities are, so what they're going to be producing and where they are. But we'll get to the ongoing commitment and what those changes look like. First of all, there have been those changes based on market conditions. But lithium, nickel, cobalt, and manganese, they're all critical materials used in lithium-ion batteries of all kinds. And lithium-ion batteries are used, as you all know, in consumer electronics, transportation. We've heard a lot about data centers, you name it, on the utility grid. That's where these batteries go in. And these batteries cannot be made without cathode active material, or CAM. CAM, the active material that I just mentioned, can't be made without precursor cathode active material called PCAM and lithium. Those are the two combinations that are required. So let me go a little bit deeper into that, because it's important to understand where this facility is. Originally, the Ascend project was going to be making the PCAM and lithium as their primary products. That's now where they are, but there was also going to be some PCAM production. So the original was to have the CAM as well as some PCAM production, but the market demand for PCAM and lithium now exceed that of the CAM. So the company has adjusted based upon these upstream products and looking at basically getting into the PCAM industry, this is why it's important. The use of batteries of all kinds are not going away. They just aren't. PCAM production is an important element of making these batteries. PCAM today is 100% produced in Asia. So this Kentucky facility will be the first of its kind in the United States, in North America, and the Western world. So it's really tied to a very important element of a much broader industry than just the EV. And I say just EV with an asterisk. It's a large industry, but it does include all of these batteries. So the products made from the recycled materials, which is critical for the retention pathway that improves U.S. independence from foreign sources, is being done in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, which we'll get to, I think, and answer in the next question. There's been rumors, and I have heard, oh my gosh, the DOE's not funding Ascend Elements. Well, the reality is that the DOE received $400 million from two different DOE grants in October of 22nd. And it was both for infrastructure, it was part of the IRA Act. $164 million was going to be used for CAM manufacturing, which I just described, and $316 million is for the PCAM. Ascend Elements worked with the U.S. Department of Energy to basically mutually agree to not tap into and pursue the $164 million grant for the CAM manufacturing, because now they're focusing on PCAM. So some of the things you may have heard about the DOE grant funding was a mutual decision to not utilize that grant, and it was done in a proactive way by Ascend Elements, which I give them a lot of credit for. So Ascend Elements will basically produce the PCAM and the lithium carbide going forward in this particular project. 40 jobs have been created, but they've committed to creating 300. Based on market conditions, they could envision 400. And as Roger knows, I'm always whispering in his ear, well, how can we get even more of those? Same thing for Blue Oval SK. But the point here is market conditions have changed. They've made adjustments. They still have funding. They do have some contractual issues with the joint venture with Turner on the building. That is an arbitration. The company has actually been working to settle issues with subcontractors. Arbitration dates, I believe, have been set, and there's ongoing communications and I believe an intent to try to solve everything prior to that arbitration date. But in the end, I don't get involved in commercial details, nor do I want to, but we do stay fully abreast of what those details are, and we've been very appreciative of Ascend Elements in providing that information. So
I want to touch on that a little bit
Yes,
more
sir.
briefly, or a little more in depth, Mr. Secretary. And Roger, thank you for being here today. And much like I say about SK, we also hope Ascend is wildly successful and finds this to be the best place in the nation to conduct and grow your business. That being said, obviously you guys are involved in a not insignificant construction dispute right now. And, you know, sometimes this is the old when elephants fight, the grass gets trampled kind of deal. You've got a lot of local people down there, local subs, local others, who don't necessarily have the level of financial depth that you and the general contractor might have. What are you guys doing to make sure that those smaller folks, as you work through these thornier issues, are able to remain liquid?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Senator McDaniel. So we're working closely with all the construction companies that have done work on our projects, and you know, we're obviously prepared to pay all legitimate authorized work done on the site. We have already done so with several subcontractors and continue to do so. The lawsuit itself with Turner Kokosing, which is the general contractor there, is moving into arbitration. And so we're not able to go into a lot of details about how that's being done, but rest assured we have been reaching out to the subcontractors and making them whole.
And that is always appreciated. Now, what about, my understanding is there's some local financial institutions and governmental agencies that have costs affiliated with this. Are you guys familiar with those, and what are you doing to help defray those costs?
Mr. Chairman, I think you're referring, and Carter can help correct me, I believe, which I give the community a lot of credit, they went out and borrowed money long before Ascend Elements even became an idea. They went out and acquired land, began investing in the infrastructure and land. I believe it's called Commerce Park, if I'm not mistaken. Park 2? You're successful in the first one, so thank you. But there are certain obligations that were taken on by the local industrial authority relative to that property, relative to the maintenance of that property, and ultimately relative to the sale of the property to Ascend Elements to address some of those loans that are outstanding. And so Carter monitors this, I think, very closely. But these loans that were taken out were first for land acquisition, and Carter, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure there's some land sale things and others that would be beneficial as everything gets paid out relative to this process moving forward.
That was good information, but I don't know that it answered my question.
Yeah, so I think I understand what the question is about now. We do have 2 lots in Hopkinsville that we're building on. Lot 1 was a grant from the city of Hopkinsville through HIF, Hopkinsville Industrial Foundation. Lot 2 we did purchase, so there's currently a promissory note on Lot 2, which Ascend Elements is paying. I believe we paid the majority of that down and continue to make payments. There was a payment that went out, I think, last month, and so we expect to have that all paid off before the end of this year, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. Do either of you anticipate coming before the General Assembly or Economic Development and asking for more money to get through the finish line of your projects?
Are you talking to both
Either
of us?
one of it, yes.
We do not anticipate that, no.
Neither does Ascend Elements.
Let me be clear on that. And I'll just say it. I'm not the most welcoming person to go meet with if there's cost overruns or difficult situations asking for additional assistance from the cabinet. We're always reasonable. We always try to sit down and understand. But that would not be met very warmly, nor has any other company that has run into financial issues coming looking for solutions from us. Do they find a warm, friendly, I'm always friendly, but they don't find a willing recipient, because I just really believe strongly that the use of incentives and funding is to get an investment, get it going, And very rare should there ever be any direct involvement when the market conditions have gone to a certain level or there's other issues relative to the company. That's what the private company should be able to take care of. That being said, we always listen, we always understand, but Mr. Chairman, I just want to make sure it was clear out there that that's not the kind of thing that we typically are receptive to when people come talk to us.
I understand. Mr. Lynn, one last question for you. My understanding is the nexus of the concern is overbilling on the projects, and there has been some allusion that that was allowed to go on under the understanding that there would be a withdrawal of funds from the feds longer than normal. Can you talk to that at all?
So again, we're looking at the invoiced costs for the project right now. We're again prepared to review and pay out all legitimate authorized work. Our project is obviously complicated by the fact that there's federal funding involved from the Department of Energy, and so we're taking great care in which invoices we're able to pay and which ones continue to be under investigation.
Very good. All right, I interrupted you, Mr. Secretary.
No, Mr. Chairman, I actually put that slide back up because when you were get to the topic, I wanted you to have the information.
You want to say thanks for all my good questions. I appreciate that.
Mr. Chairman, and to the rest of the body, we look forward to taking your questions. We felt it was really important to put in writing answers to your questions. We will always do that, and we always respect every question you have, and we always look forward to coming in and visiting. But that concludes our presentation materials for today, and we're actually looking forward to answering any additional questions.
Thank you. Representative Bridges.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is for Mr. Lynn. I don't know if you remember, we talked a few months ago, and my question is, what steps are being taken to prevent these misunderstandings from happening in the next phase of the project? I know there's questions of overbilling. There's also questions between the main contractor and the subs as far as what the main contractors were under an obligation for and what the subs were told, which was totally different. Just, we need it done tomorrow, and use every means possible to get it done, which involves a lot of overtime, a lot of extra expenses and everything. So at the end of the day, you're the ones writing the checks, you're the ones in charge. So what will Ascend do to assure to us that our constituents will be treated fairly and everything? Not that you're not. Don't read anything into this, but what are you doing to prevent this from occurring on the next step of the project?
Yeah, thank you, Representative Bridges, for that great question. So as everybody knows, construction is on pause right now. We're currently undergoing something called recontracting with our construction contractors. We're actually bidding out the remaining work on construction competitively. The main driver, as you said before, was speed. Our main customer had a very aggressive schedule, a timeline that we struggled to meet. That has since ease off a little bit. And so now we do have this extra time to take stock of what has been done, what needs to be done, and then very definitively bid out the remaining work package. And so this process will be done a lot more exhaustively and thoroughly than in the past. And we're pretty confident that with this process, we will be able to get through to the end construction with a lot greater certainty than before, and everything will go according to plan. So we've got the right people in place to do this. They have a lot of experience. We have changed out leadership, and we're very confident that we'll be able to succeed and restart construction sometime towards the end of this year or early next year.
One more question. Do you see a relatively quick end to what's in the process right now as far as the payment of these subcontractors and getting them squared up?
I can't comment on what that process will look like or how long it might take. I'm not as close to it as need be. It is an ongoing case in arbitration, so I'm sorry I can't comment on that.
Okay. I appreciate you, and I appreciate you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative. Others at this time? All right, Mr. Secretary, thank you for your time. To both of you guys, thank you for being here today. We sincerely appreciate it, and do at the end of the day, please know we wish you the best of luck. Obviously, our obligation is to constituents and to taxpayers, and you are a big part of that. But we may have some more questions in the future, but we appreciate what you're doing here in Kentucky.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for having us here today.
Mr. Secretary, thank you. All right. At this time, we'll move along. We do have some correspondence and reports that have been placed in sent to each of you electronically, so please make sure to review those. Is there any other business to come in front of this committee today? If not, our next meeting will be July the 15th at 1 p.m., chaired by Representative Petrie, and we'll stand adjourned.